Hi, everyone. Really nice to see everybody here tonight, and I'm really happy to be here with this group of great people, and very excited about this conversation about Crooked Creek and what it ecologically, geographically, but also just kind of the human community that's come together around this cool little watershed in Colchester. So what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of some restoration work that has happened at Crooked Creek over the last 2 years. And then my partners here are each we're going to join in conversation and just talk about some of the details and some of the ways that this work is really significant to them and to us and to all of our understandings of watershed restoration and water quality work as a whole. We are still waiting for one other person in our group, so hopefully Judy will be able to join us as well. And I should say that I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Alaire Diamond, an ecologist at Vermont Land Trust. And my co-presenters here tonight are Shane Japewith, who is a watershed restoration manager at the Nature Conservancy Vermont, Dr. Beverly Wemple, who is a professor of geography at University of Vermont, Evan Choquette, who is a student in the Honors College, a senior at UVM, who's working at the site, and then Rodrigue Spinet, who is an engineer at Fitzgerald Environmental Associates. And we also are Judy Dow, who's the executive director of Gidakana, and Ebeneki Elder, who has really been a huge partner with us on this project too, is part of this group. So I want to, before we begin talking about the restoration that's happened here, I want to do a land acknowledgement. And this is something that I worked on with Judy, and really it's her words more than mine. And as we do that, I just showing this image that was taken from the air last fall about this time of the Crooked Creek watershed and the pond as it existed then, and things have changed since then. But I want to share, Judy shared with me a poem that she had written about the Winooski River, and she felt that it was appropriate to bring into the conversation about Crooked Creek because of the closeness of those watersheds. Crooked Creek empties into a stream that empties into Lake Champlain, not too far from where the Winooski River enters Lake Champlain as well. And both of these areas, the Crooked Creek watershed and the much larger Winooski watershed, were home traditionally to Ebeneki people who were connected to those watersheds. And what Judy shared with me is that when we do a land acknowledgement, it's really about the land. And so I want to just read this poem that I really love. That is that's by Judy Dow. It's called Travels. I traveled the old paths, today called the main artery, once called Winooski, and then called the French highway. Systems of roadways now follow the old path that flows down to the sea. The wind, she blows me side to side as the river slaps at the edge of the road, often overflowing the vein she travels. Pelted by rain, snow, and sleet, I see the streams grow and flow into the river and down to the sea. She is so strong, holding her arms open to all she greets, to recognize her as a relative. I need to remember, she is the lifeblood of our mother flowing down to the sea. The dominant single story does not recognize my mother. They cannot see or hear the story she has to tell. They struggle to read the land and find another narrative. Mother, I'm listening. I hear your story. Tear down the dams that stop your lifeblood from traveling down to the sea. I just want to check. Judy, are you in the audience? If not, I'm going to read the second piece of the land acknowledgement that Judy was planning to read. So imagine her reading it. There is some first person statements in that. So imagine that that's coming from Judy. So she writes, I raised my children on the banks of Indian Brook, just down the road from Crooked Creek, nestled in the middle of the Munson, Butler, and Monta farms. The two sisters flow in and out of the hills of Colchester, parallel to each other, never touching, but sometimes just close enough to hear the other sing. The rolling hills are remnants of sand dunes once left behind by the melting glacier some 14,000 years ago. Together, the streams and hills provided ecosystem galore for the indigenous people of this land to survive, and the farmers of today, like the Button family farm. More than 20 different ecosystems exist on Indian Brook, and I'm quite sure the same is true for Crooked Creek. I want to acknowledge this beautiful land and all it has to offer us. The fiddleheads, sumac, berries, and nuts are abundant to help the animals and people alike to survive. These two little rivers pick up smaller streams as they meander and flow first south to north and then east to west to join at the lake. Together, the sisters merge with others on their journey and continue to travel north through the lake and up through the Richelieu River, then to the St. Lawrence River, and finally into the sea where they begin their journey over again. As time continues and the land rebounds from the weight of the last glacier, the water will no longer flow north, but rather south. The future will bring us change. To follow a raindrop from the headwaters of Crooked Creek after the land completely rebounds, one will have to see it flow north first and then south, as the lake will now flow toward the Hudson River and into the sea. The Abenaki people have no word for time. When everyone is together and everything is ready, it's time. So we might have a long wait to see that drop of water flow south down the Hudson as it did once before. Meandering causes amazing fertile pieces of land to be formed called wohanas. The constant annual flooding of the small intervales provides us with an amazing place to grow and harvest food. The common pots were shared by everyone, never once traded or sold. They are the place the animals go for food, and the place people go for the animals as their food. The wohanas are our bowl of food. Along the banks of Crooked Creek, one will find many wohanas. I want to acknowledge such fertile lands that have provided us with everything we need for so many generations. The ecosystems are abundant along Crooked Creek, providing so much more than food, beautiful meadows that dance in the wind and provide habitat for animals and birds, waterways that provide homes for fish, beaver, and muskrats, and forests that provide shelter and food for all. I don't have to think about it. My heart and mind flow as one with this little but mighty creek. I also want to acknowledge the homelands of the Winooski peoples and how they have gone through so many hardships to care for this land so that it might still provide for us today. The removal of the dam will help to clean the water and nourish many as it travels to the sea. I have gratitude for those that care. Leone. So thank you, Judy, for sharing those words. And I think it sets us up beautifully to talk about this land. So I'm going to give a quick rundown of the restoration work that's happened here in this valley. So as you can see in this photo, there's a pond, there's an earthen dam right above it, and then there is a wooded kind of valley full of white pines, the barn on one side, a field on the other side, the road, which is Route 7 and Route 2 in Colchester. And that pine-filled valley is the home of Crooked Creek, which is a small stream that starts in Severance Corners in Colchester, right in the middle of a bunch of housing and commercial development, flows north, as Judy wrote, and then into Lake Champlain after about a mile. And in the up until the 1950s, 1960s, this valley was not forested the way that you see it today. It was totally open. So this is a photo from 1954 from Gene Button and his family, one of his family photos that shows the same road, Route 7, with the pond. The dam had just been built, and you can see that it's pretty open around it. And there are even some lines there that those are paths that cows, from cows walking, up and down that hillside, which today is covered with trees. Here's another photo looking from standing right next to the pond, looking up toward it. And this is a map on the right that shows the pond here in the sort of the lower third with the blue line going through it. And then the blue line just snakes along through a very open looking field. And that's the watershed that today is full of those pines that grew up since cows stopped being in that low, steep and kind of wet area in the 1960s. So this is a little bit of history of the land. And now this is what we see. So fall 2021, the pond was still there. The watershed was full of trees. The fields on both sides are still actively being farmed. So the people on this land, so the land with the Crooked Creek watershed that I'm talking about is the Button Farm, and it was conserved and by Gene Button, who you see on the left here. Gene's family has farmed on this land since the late 1800s with cows, sheep, hay, vegetables, different kinds of crops. And Gene conserved his land and then has also kind of donated it to VLT through a reserve life estate. So he and VLT together now manage the land. And then on the right, you see the farmer, Janine Nikijimana, who is now operating a really successful and really interesting vegetable business with a nationwide reach. So the history right now, so these are those fields that you saw in 2021 were just kind of hay fields. This is 2022. Janine has cultivated about 8 acres of these fields for this very specific kind of African eggplant called Notori. And these eggplants are harvested and they're sold all over the country. They're kind of a unique and special product, and Janine has just developed a really amazing way of growing them, really high quality, and tractor trailer trucks are pulling in and driving as far as like Texas and Arizona. So there's some really innovative and interesting farming work happening on this land as well. So in this photo here on the right is that pine-filled Crooked Creek Valley. And this is what the valley looks like down, or what it did look like, maybe still does in some places, down below underneath those pines. There's a stream down there. It's a small stream, Crooked Creek. And what's interesting about it is that in all of those years that cows kind of meandered back and forth and were pastured in that area, maybe other agricultural work before that, the stream became kind of like this very single channel, what we call an incised stream. So you can see it just looks almost like a little canal that is a lot lower than the surrounding area, which traditionally would have been its floodplain. There are still floodplain species of plants that grow in this area and sort of on the right-hand side, but this creek is so low, it has cut down and eroded down so much that when we first started working out here and thinking about restoration of this watershed, we realized that there's not very many times that the creek can actually come out of that channel and out into its traditional floodplain. So this image I have on the left, this diagram, is something Shane is going to give a little more context to later. But basically what this shows is there's 6 different images of what we think about as stream evolution. So streams, as we all know, they don't just stay the same. They're not just going in tubes or sort of concrete channels, but they move, they change their dynamic. And this one in this situation is in this first upper left, this form where it's just a single channel, very incised, not accessing its floodplain very well at all. This is in contrast to, say, this lower right image where the stream does not have that deeply cut shape, and it's able to get out into its floodplain. It's able to braid and break apart and come together, and the channels can move around, and there's a lot of wetlands integrated as well. And there's just a lot more diversity happening there, structure in terms of woody structure, in terms of biodiversity, wildlife diversity, and that's very different. And so our goal in our restoration work is to move this creek, since we recognize that it's recovering from being a totally open area that was used as a farm, as part of a farm, until pretty recently, to move it back in that direction, from that single channel deeply cut incised state to this kind of more open state where there's wetlands and floodplain access. So to do that, we partnered with this great group of people that are here with me tonight, and many others as well, and including Beverly's class, Hydrology of Forested Landscapes. This group of, I think, what was it, Beverly, 30 some amazing undergraduate students at UVM came out with us. Shane and I worked with another partner, Bob Hyams, to think about how we could bring woody structure into the creek, because it traditionally didn't have any. It was totally open and there was no forest. So how can we return it to a state where there's more wood in it, and that's going to allow it to recover some of those historic sort of shapes and processes. So Beverly will talk more about some of the great collaborations that we did. We built wooden structures in the creek, but also did survey and tried to quantify and measure some of the work that we were doing. What that looked like, this is another photo from the day that we built these structures. They looked like small beaver dams, many of them, or sometimes just sort of piles of wood and sticks. And in this picture on the right, this is a LiDAR image. So it was taken from a drone that was flying very low above the creek. and taking readings that helped create this really very detailed structural kind of map of the elevations and the shading of that area. So you can see on this LiDAR image, there's this area down in the bottom left that's open and flat. That's the pond. Just above it is the dam, and then the creek kind of meanders all through here. And this is about 1/3 of a mile of creek before it gets off of the property. Each of these little icons here, and this is an image that Evan has shared with me. It's one that he developed with for his research that he'll share. Each of these triangles is one of the wooden structures that we built in the creek. So in this case, you see some students, you see Bob Himes, and you see Brenda Bergman from the Nature Conservancy all pounding in stakes, and then they're going to weave willow in between to kind of recreate this kind of beaver dam idea. We built about 25 or so of these structures, and then also took cross sections. So Beverly's students, and Evan is really working on this, made these cross sections, which these yellow icons are showing. So that was a bunch of restoration. Here's an image from above after that work was done. So these red circles, well, the two red circles here and then one down here are showing the structures that were built. So right here, where my cursor is in sort of that upper circle, there's a line of kind of wood, and there's some pine needles like gathered up behind it. The stream is flowing north, and this is after a big rain, and you can see that the water was just staying behind that structure. And instead of just flowing quickly down into that low incised channel, it was slowing in the creek valley, and it was actually going out into its floodplain a bit. And that's what we wanted. We want to slow the water. We want it to go out into the floodplain and not just kind of rush out of there like it's a pipe being drained as quickly as possible. The next circle down to the right is a pile of the material we used, which was actually a lot of buckthorn, an invasive species, buckthorn posts. We did some invasive species treatment, and then used that wood to actually build the structures. So we're taking that material that was really like not a tree that we want to grow in the forest because it was not allowing native species to grow, but then using it as a structural material to build these beaver dam analogs. And then down to the left of that is another one. And then we also used some hay bales as part of that structural, the construction as well. Another type of structure we built is something called a post-assisted log structure. So this is a sort of a conglomeration of those posts with some other material. The idea with that is that it's meant to just be put on one side of the creek that will send water to the other side and start to recreate kind of more of a meandering pattern of the creek. So it doesn't just go straight down the valley, again, rushing out like you're flushing a pipe, but it's kind of more meandering. That's also part of the restoration that we were trying to do. And then here's a close-up of one of the beaver dam analogs. So these vertical buckthorn posts, and then there were willow stake branches that were woven in between them. Interestingly, some of these willows actually have taken root and started to grow into new willow trees, which is great. But you can really see the difference here in terms of the water moving out into the floodplain on the sides, and then there's a drop in, down to the lower area below the structure. This image might be a little hard for folks to interpret, but it is basically a before and after. On the before, what I like to kind of point to here is just that you can see this shaded creek area is more of just like a line kind of moving through. And then if you look on the left, on the after, where those structures are, those beaver dam analogs and post-assisted log structures, you're seeing just like less relief. So it's more like the water is able to move out into the floodplain. You're having, it's functioning more like a wetland complex than just like a creek that's just flushing water out. And then from there, so that was one big piece of restoration work. And then the second piece really revolved around the dam that we talked about in those photos that I showed at the beginning of this. So with the dam, we decided we wanted to remove the dam. This was a project that had been prioritized by our regional, like what we call a tactical basin plan for the area. So the regional water quality plan. And that had been something that was in the plan for many years. And so when we decided to take this on, we worked with Fitzgerald Environmental Associates, which is a local Colchester environmental consulting group with a ton of experience in hydrology, in environmental engineering. and in wetland and stream restoration. And so Rodrigue is here with me tonight. We also, I know that there were several folks on your team, Rodrigue, who were really part of this project. And so with this, and I know this image is very small and it's not intended for you to be able to read it or anything, is what we decided to do here was to continue that idea of restoring that creek to be more of a functioning and high quality headwater stream. So our plan was to remove the dam and then to restore a sort of a naturally flowing stream valley above it. And that included putting wood in, just like we did down below. But the wood that we put in this, the upper part of the valley was more, there was a lot more engineering and sort of intentionality around the size, the placement, the level and how that was placed in. And I'll get more into that. But basically the dam was removed. A creek valley was excavated out based on what Rodrigue and his colleagues thought were the historic shape of that creek. And then we also incorporated some small wetland areas alongside it. So these kind of gray areas are small pools that are now holding water. So the idea is we're going to take out the earthen dam that was built, recreate this valley, and then also recreate some small kind of wetland features that would be used to attract wildlife and just have more biodiversity in terms of plants and also slow water, because really like that part of the big intention here is that we're trying to slow water and not have all of that flush of nutrients, phosphorus and others go down into Lake Champlain. So what did that look like? This is the dam in the sort of bottom of this open area here. And the dam had just been breached. This drone image is showing kind of like a week or so after the dam was breached by our construction crew that we hired to work on this project. What they did is they just kind of cut a hole in it just by excavating out the soil, the sediment. It was all natural fill that had been used to create the dam. And then the pond drained slowly over several weeks. The intention was that it would dry out all the sediment that was here. So that's what it looked like before the main construction piece started. You also see over in this upper left, there's a pile of logs that still have their roots attached to them. Those are a really important part of the construction and the design as well. And then after that, there was a couple weeks in August, the dry part of the summer where Jeff Corey Excavating was the contractor that we decided to work with. They are really experienced in doing wetland restoration. They're a great crew. They were out for 2 weeks straight with 2 excavators and an earth mover and this cool truck that was kind of like a dump truck on tracks, moving around the sediment that had built up behind the dam in the 70 years that it was there. I think I forgot to mention at the start that the dam was built in the late 1940s, early 1950s. So over that time, a lot of soft sediment had just accumulated behind it. So a lot of this project was really removing that it was very slippery, very kind of still very wet, despite the time we tried to have it dry out. All that material, it was incorporated into the wetland restoration. Some of it was taken out of the pond valley itself and placed elsewhere on the property. As I mentioned before, we also incorporated wood, these trees with the root wads. Here is a picture of either Rodrigue's or my hand pointing at the construction plans for that. And you can see what it is that there are these series of wooden weirs that are made of 2 logs with their root wads attached, and they're kind of crossing each other at a very like wide angle with the root wads in the middle, and those are across the whole stream valley. And that's the idea with that is that natural wood is going to prevent sort of deepening erosion in the valley. It's going to control the grade or control the slope of the water or slope of the valley as water flows over it. This is kind of what it looks like after this was built. This right here in the sort of the upper third of this photo, there are these 2 root wads. So those logs that I showed in the last image, this is one root wad here. There's the other one. They're crossing in the middle. And this is after a really heavy rain in September. And you can see that they're very flat across the valley, and it's now full of water and it's moving across. And those logs are kind of maintaining the grade there. There's some cattails here. The green that you see is cattails that just popped right back up after the project was done. So this is what the restoration looked like when it was finished. This really bright green area that is in the foreground of the picture is kind of where the dam was. And then the area to the left is where the pond was. But it's all been reshaped into this broad valley. It's called a stage 0 valley. Shane is going to talk a little bit more, and Frederic as well, about that. But basically the idea is that we wanted to create a broad valley. It's about 25 to 35 feet wide, with those trees, those root wads in it, with other wood as well. You can see there's just a lot of like woody material. There's also some rocks in there that are meant to just create structure and maintain the grade of that valley. And the idea with it being so wide, as you remember before, it's a pretty small creek. It's about 4 or 6 feet wide in the lower part. It's not that it's going to be flowing with this much water all the time, but we wanted to make sure that the water was able to kind of decide, if we want to anthropomorphize, decide where it was going to go at any given point. So not that it would be forced into one small channel, but that it could like move across the valley, it could grade, it could split apart if that was kind of what it quote wanted to do. One interesting thing about the excavation and the construction process is we did uncover some rocks that looked like they had been shaped by water, and this was 6 or 8 feet down below the set, in some places like below where the dam was and below where some of that soft sediment had piled up. We started to get to this layer where there were these smooth rocks that are the kind of rock that you see. What is it? Iberville shale, right? That's this kind of rock with those like white quartzite bands in it, that deep kind of blue. So I thought that was really a cool sign when we started to see that. Otherwise, this was not a rocky valley. It's very clayey, very fine soil, but there was a layer where you started to see more of this, showing that this place had been, somehow these rocks got there in the past, in the historic past. Another part of the project was that we replaced the culvert that was on the farm road, just to make it wider, make sure the stream was not constricted as it was flowing through that culvert. That's another piece. When culverts are too small, they can result in scouring down below them. And that was actually one of the big problems with the dam, why we decided to remove it. There was a pipe that was coming through the dam that was then pouring out, and over the 70 years, it had really scoured out like a deep hole beneath the dam, and that was partly what was creating that really incised condition below the dam. So part of our project was to try to prevent that from happening in the future. So we replaced the culvert that was there with one that was appropriately sized, and it's about 5 feet wide, which is the idea. That's typically the size of the stream when there's been sort of a reasonable sized storm. We don't want it to be constricted. Then there was restoration of plant material. This is a turtlehead, a beautiful wetland plant that I just love. I dug this out of the pond area before the excavation happened and just stuck it upstream in the creek. And then after the restoration was done, I brought the plant back down and planted it again. So we did several different stages of planting to restore some of the plant material, the diversity here. So we worked with another group of students from UVM. This is a class up in the upper right called the Restoration Fellows. It's a 1-year undergraduate course where students are really immersed in ecological restoration. We had a group of VYCC, Vermont Youth Conservation Corps, a crew that came out and helped us to just do some more earthwork in this valley that was kind of too fine of a scale for the excavators to do. So we had this great group of young people out with shovels and doing some of that. In this case, in that lower left, they're kind of shaping some hole. There's some little holes that had formed around some of the wood that was in the creek valley, and they're kind of filling those in. Planted native species like in sort of the upper middle. This is an ostrich fern that was transplanted downstream. And then we did a big tree planting with about 200 trees planted all up and down the sides of the valley just a couple weeks ago. And this was with a group of partners, actually, some of you who are here tonight, as well as BLT staff and some other folks. So we planted a range of native species. And Judy Dow was a huge part of helping to create that planting plan based on plants that were significant for food and medicinal and ceremonial or spiritual uses. So she brought a lot of great wisdom from her her just real depth of knowledge of traditional uses of plants. So that was a huge piece that's just setting this whole valley on a stage toward growing back into a really wonderful wetland stream valley. So I think I'm getting, this was some of the people who were out at that planting day, BLT staff, just a bunch of partners, great group. And I want to finish with just a quick video. I think this will work. This is my colleague at BLT, Chris Moore, hanging a time-lapse camera up high in a pine tree before the restoration happened. And I'm hoping that this will get us to our video where you can see here their excavators are moving up the valley, they're taking out that mud, they're sort of starting to create that stream valley down below, they're smoothing that out. You can see they're really working to get the grades right. And then they brought the wood down, they're starting to add those wood pieces in. They've done that, grass is growing, mulch is put down, and then there's a group of people. So I think those are the students that came out in September. So really fun. It's neat to see that all compressed into like a 27 seconds. On to my next. So I think before I go to that, I just want to pause and just say that's just a quick overview of all the work here. And now I'm really excited to introduce all of these guests and partners who are here with me tonight to share a little bit about sort of what it was like for them to be working on this project in this valley, why they were drawn to it, and what they are taking from it. So I'm going to just call, I think I'm going to start with you, Shane, and then you can pass to the next person. But the first question that I'm really interested in hearing from each of you is just like, what drew you to working on this project, working on this property, other than me maybe like calling you up and asking you to do it, which happened for a couple of you. But what was it that kind of made you say, yeah, this seems like an interesting place to work? What made you want to spend time here? What made you curious about this land? So I'll start with you, Shane.
Yeah, thanks, Alaire. So one of the things that we're really focused on at the Nature Conservancy is identifying solutions to environmental biodiversity, climate change, the crisis that we all know we're facing, and find solutions to those problems that can be implemented at a scale that really results in outcomes that really move the needle and make a significant difference, given the scale of the challenge. And one of the things that we have seen as a freshwater restoration solution that's scalable is this idea of replenishing our river systems with the woody structure that has been removed since starting back in European settlement times. And so this is a technique, Alaire, I think maybe you mentioned it. This is a technique that's become known as low-tech process-based restoration. We have identified that low-tech process-based restoration, as I said, as a solution that really seems scalable because it's so simple, and it's so much cheaper than other forms of restoration. So we partnered with Alaire and the Vermont Land Trust to bring our respective expertise to improve our ability to understand and utilize this process-based riverscape restoration approach so that we could demonstrate it to the broader Vermont freshwater restoration community. We started with a couple very, very small projects, and then Crooked Creek presented itself as a great opportunity to apply the approach and what we've learned about that approach to a slightly larger stream. And so that was really the thing, and that drew me to it. Is it was just a perfect opportunity to apply what we had learned on smaller streams to a slightly larger stream. And then secondarily, because of its proximity to UVM, the site's located right in Colchester, and that's not far from the university. It also provided a great opportunity to engage the University of Vermont professors and their students to get help with the construction and the monitoring and really increase the learning outcomes around this work, and create a larger constituency. So I think it's, you know, those two things are the primary answers to that question.
Thanks, Shane. Really, how about you?
Sure. Maybe, Alaire, if you go back to that slide 9, I'll say that kind of segueing off of what Shane said, I was in the spring of 2021 planning this fall course that I was going to teach anyway, hydrology of forested landscapes, which was an attempt to mount a class that would work for both our forestry program and the geography program, but also serve a bunch of different students at UVM. And I've known Shane for about 20 years, and he sent me an email saying, hey, we're going to work with Vermont Land Trust on this restoration project in Colchester. Would you want to get some students involved? And the timing was perfect because this class was coming up in the following fall, and we went out and visited the site. And the fact that it was really close to campus and would provide a field opportunity for the students to accompany the classroom learning. We are the state's land grant university, and so inherent in our mission is that we want to serve the state and communities and work with partners. And it was just a really great opportunity for us. So we ended up with this class of about 35 students from 4 colleges. We had students from Arts and Sciences, Ag and Life Sciences, the Rubenstein School, and the College of Engineering. And our involvement included participating in that build day that you mentioned, Alaire, and then participating in a few more days where the students conducted surveys using surveying equipment to learn some of these geomorphology skills. And then a lot of work at the end of the semester to crunch data and develop projects for you all, our partners. So the students got to learn how to be consultants through that process. And it was a really nice kind of integrated learning opportunity. Like I was the instructor, but Shane and Alaire were these partners who served as our clients. The students got to learn how to be professionals in that context. So what drew me into it was the partnerships and the really great opportunity for the students to learn from that and the chance to get into this project on the ground floor. The hope is that you're going to hear from Evan, one of my students, next, but the hope is to have lots of Evans come along later and more UVM students involved so that we can continue to track these changes over time.
Thank you, Beverly. Evan, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, you know, as Beverly mentioned, she ran this class in the fall that I was a part of. And, you know, as part of the Honors College, I have to, I'm doing an undergraduate thesis. So kind of like a long research project. And, you know, partway through the semester, I spoke with Beverly and she said, you know, why don't you keep running with the work at Crooked Creek and, you know, keep monitoring and kind of build the foundation for future tracking of the site to see how effective all this work that, you know, our class had done and the Vermont Land Trust and the Nature Conservancy had done at the site and was going to do. And so, you know, and between needing a topic for my thesis and just kind of a general interest in like sediment processes and how landscapes change, you know, that's kind of how I started this. And then also to again, to like kind of lay the foundation for future efforts was really neat to me to kind of feel like I could contribute more than just like some singular research project, and not to mention in my home state too. So to work with local organizations and local stakeholders to kind of take on or work with this project that has a lot of meaning, and we'll have some pretty cool outcomes, I hope. So that's what drew me to this. Yeah.
Yeah. Rodrigue, how about you?
Yeah, so I think, echo a lot of the things that have been said by the other panelists. I think the local aspect of the project was something that really drew me to it. Our office is right down the road And as soon as I knew that we were going to be involved on the project, the idea of being able to stop at the site after the restoration was completed and seeing how it evolves over time was really exciting. We do restoration projects all over Vermont, and some of them are really far away, and it's sort of, you complete the restoration and you rarely see them afterwards. But this one was so close that, you know, we're able to basically stop and take a look at it as it changes over time. So that's really exciting. I think the landscape setting was also very well suited for this stage 0 restoration approach that we took. And not every restoration offers these kinds of opportunities. And then finally, it was a chance to really partner up with a range of organizations that share similar interests. We've done a little bit of work with VLT before, but this was a chance to really dive a little bit deeper into that relationship and get involved in a restoration project that has a lot of benefits for Lake Champlain locally, for Crooked Creek and Colchester. And so just a great project overall.
Thank you all. I mean, it's everything you're saying, just it makes it really builds a picture of kind of how much opportunity there is in this place. You know, it's a small watershed, but its proximity to UVM, proximity to Lake Champlain, its accessibility. You know, it's like right along Route 7. You can walk down a road for 2 minutes and you're there. And I just think it's really cool to have all of you here because, you know, as a group, you've worked on both this downstream piece and then this upstream piece, and they're very different levels of kind of engineering and investment and, you know, equipment, whether it's like students pounding in stakes versus an excavator that needs to like mobilize and be on site. But the concepts in both are really similar. So it's achieving a couple different restoration outcomes in different ways, but they're all kind of going through the same conceptual piece. I'm really curious about sort of how you work. Like, what are you actually doing when you're as a partner? If I were to show up at Crooked Creek, or if I were to come to your office, and you were working on this project in some way, like, just give us a snapshot of what you would have been up to if I just popped in. I think maybe we'll just start with Shane again, and we can go through in the same order. And if any of you want me to move to a slide to illustrate what you're talking about, just let me know, and I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, sure, Lair. So yeah, perhaps this would be a good time as I'm talking to scroll through my slides, and I can cue you on when to advance those. So I guess I served as a technical advisor on this project, helping to assess and analyze the existing condition of the stream, and develop a restoration design that really addressed the issues that existing condition presented, and then also how to implement the design. So, you know, if you came by the office when we were preparing for this project, I'd be deeply immersed in some of the design manuals that have recently come out around this idea of low-tech process-based restoration, which is really, you know, at its heart is replenishing the structural elements to the stream, you know, the log jams, the beaver dams, in some cases not here, but landslides are a part of that structural element that's really critical for river health. So, you know, that's kind of what I was doing. There's a great series of training modules that the University of Utah has put out from their restoration consortium group around this sort of approach. So that's kind of what I was doing to develop the expertise to really provide technical assistance. And so just a little bit about this project, and that's what these slides kind of focus on. Where if you go back to the first slide in my series.
Okay. And I'm trying to make it full screen again as well, Shane. So
Okay.
I think I'm actually gonna stop sharing and then start again.
That looks pretty good from here. Not
Okay.
But
let me just run it again. So the first one in your series. This one?
There we go. Yeah, that one. That one. And I'll try to move quickly here and not get overly complex. So, you know, just a little background on I guess, river morphology, fluvial geomorphology, which is the science of landforms that are created by flowing water, i.e. rivers and floodplains, and the condition of our rivers. And so, you know, what the first question I think people probably have that aren't terribly familiar with this field is so what is wrong with our rivers? And the answer to that, in one of the things that's wrong with our rivers right now, one of the ways in which they're degraded is the result of a historic management that, you know, since European settlement has included straightening, snagging of woody structure, removal of beavers and beaver dams, armoring of banks to prevent erosion and keep rivers where we want them to be. And all of these activities have had the effect of decreasing the resistance to erosion that our channels have, and also increasing the power of the flow, which results to what's referred to as channel incision, which is essentially the slicing, the river's slicing into the valley bottoms and becoming so deeply cut into the earth that they're unable to spill their flows onto the surrounding floodplain. And this has tremendous implications in terms of water quality as a result of all the erosion that occurs. It leads to increased flooding downstream because you don't get storage of flood flows at the local floodplains. So all that water is flushed downstream. And it's really detrimental to in-stream and floodplain habitat. So in Vermont, over the years, the Vermont DEC has assessed about 5,000 miles of river, and they found that about 75% of those assessed streams are in this incised condition where the rivers are you know, essentially disconnected from their surrounding floodplains. And these images here, the one on the left, the figure shows the process of incision. And I think you can follow that, where the uppermost picture in the figure is a stable channel or a channel in pre-disturbance condition that's well connected to its floodplain, and then it goes through this series of slicing into the valley bottom, and then it goes through this widening process and so on. And then a couple of images. The top one label is being from Mississippi. The one on the lower right being from the Wanzer Brook, which is a tributary to the Black River in the town of Fairfield. So that's the problem with our rivers. And Larry, if you advance to the next slide. In restoring rivers, well, let me just start with, in restoring rivers, we have typically applied engineering that informs excavation processes to rebuild the river and reconnect it to the floodplain. Alaire, I think if you could go back a slide. Yeah, right there. Thank you. So we work to rebuild these rivers to some sort of form that we believe is the pre-disturbance condition. And for a long time, you know, the science of fluvial geomorphology and engineering has told us that, you know, the dominant natural river form was a single thread channel that meandered across the valley when in these broad and flat valley scenarios. And there really hasn't been a lot of focus on the biology, the downed wood and the beaver dams, et cetera. So when we would rebuild rivers, we would apply the engineering and inform the excavators to go and build a single thread channel, and that wound its way back and forth across the valley. We didn't really worry a lot about the wood in these exercises. And then one final slide, Alaire, if you could. Thank you. So since about the year 2000, a number of papers have come out that have really pushed back on the idea that the dominant form of rivers is a single thread channel. And really really suggested that our rivers and their pre-disturbance, pre-European colonization, fur trade and beaver trapping that extirpated beavers almost entirely from, well, almost extirpated beavers from the continent. The rivers really were what's referred to as an anastomose condition, where there's lots of small channels that are barely carved into the landscape and flood so frequently that most of the floodplain is comprised of wetland. So and also that biology is super important for this process. The same diagram that Alaire showed earlier, that just this is a representation of that same figure that I showed earlier, that process of a channel becoming incised and widening and so on. But here, an updated version, really just trying to show the importance of biology, the wood and the beaver dams, and how they can lead to a full restoration of that river system. So this is what we build. The lower image on the right is a photo from a presentation by a professor named Colin Thorne out of the University of Nottingham, who's been really foundational, written some really foundational papers in this whole idea of around the new thinking around the pre-disturbance river condition and the restoration approaches we ought to be taking. And so we're restoring rivers by installing lots of wood. We're letting multiple channels form, and really just allowing for a lot of dynamic process. So that's just a really significant evolution in the river restoration approach that I've observed since starting in this field about the year 2000. And this is what we really tried to do at Crooked Creek. So thanks for the time to show those. I just wanted to provide that context for folks.
That's great, Shane. So to answer like, what are you doing? If I'm hopping in, you're just really observing what that river system's looking like and trying to figure out ways to get it to look more like these pictures. So that's great. Yeah, how about, let's jump to Evan. What are you doing if I'm happening to come across you in the valley or in the office?
Do you mind popping over to, I think it's slide 30, or just, I think right after Shane's.
Yeah.
So Shane mentioned a lot about rivers changing or landscapes changing. And so I guess the bulk of what I'm doing for my thesis is documenting that change. So in this photo on the left here, you can see that, well, not me, but some of my classmates from last fall, after we installed these structures that are intended to change the shape of the channel, to, again, trying to strive for that that kind of stage 0 wetland condition. They're measuring the elevation of the land at this at one particular cross section of the stream, and so that's the process I've been repeating a couple of times now. I think 4 over the past year, and it's produced this graph that you see on the right, where it's the elevation of, again, the elevation of this cross section of the stream over time. And so you can see in this one, there's probably been about 10 centimeters, so like about 4 inches of the stream bed actually gaining sediment and becoming more shallow. And so will you advance to the next slide, please? And so we have 12 of these cross sections upstream to downstream along that 1/3 of a mile stretch of Crooked Creek. All of the goal of trying to capture the changes that the structures we've installed in the stream are causing. And so you can see that in the top left here that over the course of a year, there's been almost no change, or essentially no change in the stream. But then at others downstream, cross section 4 again, and cross section 10, you can see this building up of the stream bed, which is a lot of what we're shooting for. And what the goal is raising the stream bed and reconnecting the stream with its floodplain, making it so water can't come up and over onto the floodplain. Yeah, so that's what I'm working on. You'll see me out there measuring the ground.
Or at your computer, making these awesome looking graphs. It's so cool to see the change.
Indeed.
That's great. Rodrigue, how about you?
Yeah, so if you were to stop at my office while we were designing the restoration, the removal of the dam and the restoration of the stream, I think you could have, you might have been likely to have seen me looking at historical black and white imagery of the site and to see what it was like before disturbance, before the dam was built. Or you might have seen me look at maps to understand the topography of the whole area and how it relates to the watershed of Crooked Creek and areas both upstream and downstream of the project area. To try and get a sense of what the slopes are, the gradients, the drainage, how water is moving through the landscape. And then once you have sort of this background information, you can start drafting plans. And that's something that, you know, is complex and then eventually becomes, you know, the plans that you hand over to a contractor. And that's what they're looking at when they're about to start digging and grading. So you might have seen me drafting plans to show not only what existing conditions are like, but also what we're proposing to do, and sort of have both of these things overlaid on the same plan, and try to make it as informative and as clear as possible so that when we're about to actually do it, everybody can sort of follow along and understand what the basic concept is. So I think these are the things you would have seen me doing during the design process.
Yes. And then, you know, out when construction was happening, you or someone on your team was out every day, working with the contractors, seeing how it was taking shape, making sure the plans were being followed as well. So there's a whole range from conceptual to just really practical in the mud.
Yep,
work.
definitely. And then there's things you don't expect, and then you have to sort of think on your feet, or, you know, adjust your plans. In this particular project, I don't think we had too many surprises, actually. But yeah, you have to be able to adjust your plans when things come up.
Yeah. That's great. And I know we're at 8:01. I just wanted to give Beverly a moment and also say that there's been some great questions coming in the Q&A. We're not going to have time to answer them like live, but I'm going to keep them here, and as a group we'll get back to you. We'll probably include them in the follow-up email that we'll send. So thank you for putting those questions in. So Beverly, let's finish with you. What's a typical moment for you in this project?
Yeah, well, you know, through that semester when the students were engaging, it was all around sort of crafting a course and shepherding that process through, and then working with Evan over the summer and into the fall to continue the work. And, you know, everything from big picture, how are we going to show the effectiveness of this work from a physical standpoint, to how are you going to create a set of graphs that a lay audience like the ones on tonight are going to understand. But another thing that this class has sort of touched upon is you might see me participating in an effort in the state called the Functioning Floodplains Initiative, which Shane is also involved in, and involves a group of consultants and people from the State Agency of Natural Resources and UVM partners. Fitzgerald Environmental Associates is part of the leading team of this, looking for opportunities around the state to reconnect rivers to their floodplains. And provide the kinds of